Hello and greetings everyone, Darth Koldis here. Now today I wanted to expand a little bit on the whole plot hole video that I did, and in this video I want to go in special about Mary Sue or bad character writing. Now I have touched a little bit on this in the last video, but I think it really warrants to make a whole story about it. Now the main problem that people have is that the term Mary Sue is already misunderstood and misused. Usually it's thrown around as bad character writing, and sure, it is a form of bad character writing, but there are many ways to write a bad character, and not every bad character is a Mary Sue. However, Mary Sues are almost always badly written characters, with very few examples where it kinda works. Now, what is a Mary Sue and why is it even called a Mary Sue? Because many say, oh, that's a sexist term and whatnot. It's called that because the term is based on a character that was written this way. The first known iteration of a Mary Sue character was literally called Mary Sue, and it was written in Star Trek fan fiction. Some compared the Mary Sue character to what was it called? Wesley? Damn, I forgot the last name. The son of the redhead doctor. Yeah, you know who I mean. Because Wesley was also clearly a Mary Sue character, and if it's a male Mary Sue character, some people call it a Gary Stu, but technically speaking, it's still a Mary Sue character because the term is based on a character, and it's not sexist to call it that because it's the origin of the word. It's, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, if you do that, if you write a Mary Sue character, you have to know what the term means. And there is a whole list of things that a Mary Sue character can have, doesn't necessarily have to have. But usually a Mary Sue character checks a lot of these boxes. Not every single one. Not every self-insert character is a Mary Sue, though Mary Sue characters quite often are self-inserts. Mary Sue characters usually are very well liked by everyone for no reason, and that is really the main point about a Mary Sue character. It's that whatever trait they have is not properly explained in world. Mary Sue characters are liked by everyone for no reason. They're just, oh, it's Mary Sue, we like her. Why? Don't know, we just love her. Mary Sue characters usually are even liked by the bad guys or respected or something like that for, again, no reason. And the real problem with the Mary Sue character is not that these traits are there, it's how they're implemented and that they're not explained well. Can you have a character that is super well liked by everyone? Yes, you can. There's many franchises that do have a character that is genuinely loved by almost everyone, or at least respected by the bad guys. But if it's explained properly, that is not a problem, that is not an issue. Just have to tell us why the person is liked. And there's many ways to explain why a person is liked. You can have a lot of natural charisma where you enter a room and everyone already knows. You can have amazing looks that make people more positively towards you. You may be a person that generally tries to help everyone all the time without regards for themselves, which usually tends to make you well liked by other people. You can have strict principles that perfectly align with whatever society you happen to be in, then everyone in that society will like you because you're basically a role model for them. There's many ways you can explain why a person is well liked. You can be a hero of whatever because you did something super amazing and people will like you. That is how kinda this thing works. You can be a super well liked person, but you have to give us a reason why that is. And the reason Mary Sue was liked by everyone was because, oh, she's Mary Sue. That's not an explanation. That's just a statement. And since I do Star Wars content, I want to link this to Daisy Ridley's character, Rey, and I want to do this as a comparison to Anakin and Luke, because quite often people say, well, if Rey is a Mary Sue, then so is Luke and Vader. And no. While they do share traits, the main difference is that with Luke and Vader it's explained, with Rey it's not. I give you a great example, something that many people may have missed. There is a movie, I think it's the first one, where Rey, yeah, it's the first one, where there's this very beautiful scene where Rey stands in the rain and she's so happy, she's dancing, she has almost tears in her eyes because she has never seen so much water in her life, because she grew up on a desert planet. Water was super scarce and she had to work her ass off just to survive, to get enough drinking water to live. Showering was out of the question. That was a waste of water. So this person saw rain and basically broke into tears because she's never seen so much water in her life. It was a beautiful scene, and in the next movie she can perfectly swim. That's a Mary Sue trait, because how the hell can this person who has never seen rain in her life swim? Yeah, exactly. She shouldn't be able to. She does it anyway. That's why we call it a Mary Sue. Similar things, some say, how can she wield a lightsaber so well? Because she didn't have any prior training. Some people say, in her defense, well, she was a scavenger and she had this stuff, and she knew how to handle the stuff to defend herself. How often did she actually use it to defend herself? Against what weapon did she fight with that? And more importantly, a staff and a lightsaber, technically speaking, two different things. I'll show you. Lightsaber, you can do lots of things that you can, like, it behaves quite differently from a staff, because a staff you can't do the same moves with, and it behaves differently, and it's much slower, and there's many things like that can happen with a staff that usually do not happen with a lightsaber, even though they technically speaking can. The fact files are heavy, so okay, so just to make you aware of that, a lightsaber and a staff are two different things, and just because you are somewhat good with a staff doesn't mean you are good with a lightsaber. The other problem is that the first time she picked up a lightsaber, she immediately was able to defeat a proficient, well-trained person that also had a lightsaber. That's not how reality is supposed to work. And more importantly, some fans would actually say that, well, Adam Driver's character at this point had a bad day. He had a wound from a Wookiee, what's it called, the crossbows. Damn, I blank on names today. The Wookiee bolt gun, whatever it's called, the crossbow, wounded him, so he wasn't at his best. Agreed. But have you seen the moves that he pulled in that fight? If he was that badly injured, how did he pull those moves? Because if you are badly injured, you're not supposed to fight like that. And more importantly, how does that make her wield the blade so proficiently? Because that's also different. Winning is a different thing than showing skill. Because, in reality, winning is not that much of an issue, because luck is a thing. And quite often duels are ended in seconds, and it's usually not the more proficient person winning, it's usually the one with a little bit more luck winning, if they are not too far apart. Because if there is a serious training difference, then 99 out of 100 times the proficient person is gonna win. How do I say that? In Star Wars, the problem is that in universe we have a thing called the Force and precognition, and if you're trained in that, you see things coming before they even happen. Like, you have a lot of advantage, which is how I explain to myself how those insane fighting choreographies in Star Wars actually work, because duels over 10 minutes are not realistic. But if both people have the Force and know what's coming next, it's basically a studied choreography that goes for as long until someone messes up the choreography. That makes sense, but it is making Rey look even worse in this, because she is not trained with precognition, Adam's character is. Kylo is. So he should know what she's doing before she knows what she's doing. And that he loses to that, again, makes no sense. And then we have Finn pick the thing up, and you know how this goes. How are you so good at something that you're doing literally the first time in your life? This is not talent, this is stupid writing. And there's then her force powers. Well, she's a Palpatine, so because her granddad is powerful in the force, I get the idea, but there is a difference between potential and power. There's a difference between potential and realized potential, because we have many force users in Star Wars that have had little potential and yet became amazing with the force because they trained hard. We have people with insane potential that never got anywhere because they didn't train. Because in Star Wars, in universe, in order to do anything with the force, you have to have some potential and you have to have lots of training, and the training is the part that really makes the difference, not so much the potential. Potential is just that. If you have the genes for an Arnold Schwarzenegger type body, and you never train and you never work out once in your life, you'll never have that body. No matter. If you don't train for it, you'll never have that. Potential can be there. If you don't realize it, it's just not happening. Same with the force. If you have insane force capability but you're not trained, can't do anything with it. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons why Jedi refuse to train people that are a little bit older, because the older you are, the more likely you are to question the Jedi and fall to the dark side, and yada yada yada, and they don't want to give power to someone who will fall to the dark side eventually, which is why they refuse to train them. Because if they don't receive any training, they might still have crazy force potential, but they will never do anything with it. And that's why the Jedi refuse to train older people. So if Rey has force potential, sure, she didn't have training ever, which is why she can't do with it. Now, of course, she does receive training later on from Luke, and Luke is supposed to be a fantastic teacher, which in the movie he is not. And time. Now, many people will point out that Luke wasn't trained for all that long by Yoda and Obi-Wan, but at least his training lasted a lot longer than Rey's training. So, and I'd say that Yoda was definitely a better teacher than Luke. So, yeah, Obi-Wan probably was too. So, you get the general idea. Her powers are not really explained in universe. She just has them because, well, she's Rey. And there's so many things happening with this character that it's crazy. And unexplained powers are a Mary Sue trait. Getting strong without training is a Mary Sue trait. Being the best at something without an explanation why is a Mary Sue characteristic. Example: how exactly does Daisy's character, Rey, how does Rey fly ships at the proficiency level of a person that did this for literal decades in his life, professionally? Have you ever seen a teenager who has never steered a car before get into a car for the very first time in their entire life? And now compare that to a professional truck driver who did this for 30 years. Who do you think is better at it? You're probably not the teenager. Daisy, however, is somehow... Rey is somehow better than Han at flying his own ship on top. Not just any ship, his ship. And you know, Han has modified the ship himself for decades at this point. And somehow Rey improves it. I'd say this is a Mary Sue characteristic, and one thing I give to her, she is a scavenger, so she has some mechanical skill. She has some knowledge on the topic of how to repair and upgrade and do stuff to ships. That said, if you are a mechanic of anything, you kind of know that different models, let's say, while the basics are the same, the actual stuff, the actual wiring can be very different. And just because you know how to fix model A doesn't mean that you know how to fix model B. You have a better chance at figuring it out. Again, the basics are the same, but when it comes to details, problems arise. Coding as example. If you're into coding, just because you know one code language doesn't make you proficient with another. Some basics are the same, sure, but it doesn't mean it directly translates from one to the other. So yeah. And to top it off, Millennium Falcon is a class of ship that is super rare to begin with. So I don't think Rey has ever encountered that. And that she has more knowledge on it than Han makes literally no sense, because Han is into that same field his entire life. I don't know, man. And how does she defeat? How do they defeat Snoke and the Imperial Guards? Like if you watch the fight of Rey and Kylo fighting the Imperial Guards, they literally edited out the weapon of the hand of one, because otherwise he would have killed Rey. And it's not a dropped weapon. It's not a I got my weapon kicked out of my hand or force pulled it or anything somewhat believable. No, it was really in this frame, weapon there, Rey back like this, and instead of doing and killing Rey, they literally made the weapon vanish out of the hand. It's in this frame, weapon there, ready to kill Rey. Next frame, no weapon. Not to mention that for half of the choreographies there is like 10 guards and they're attacking one by one instead of going at them in a group. And then they kill Snoke, who can read minds and is somehow surprised by Kylo. What a load of BS. And this is just generally bad writing. And to add to the whole Mary Sue thing, while Luke is not a Mary Sue, he's not liked by everyone. Not instantly, and unlike Rey, not as respected or liked by his enemies either. He did actually do training, and his story arcs kinda do explain some things that he does. Force magic does the trick for other things. I'm not saying that Luke is not having any badly written traits. He has some badly written traits, but overall he's the way more believable character. Now, Vader, even better, because Vader is the chosen one, the big guy, the guy with the highest midichlorian count ever, who was actually properly trained as a Jedi, who did these insane races and stuff like that. So his story is actually well explained, so I don't get why anyone would call Vader a Mary Sue. With Luke I can get the general idea, because he didn't receive all that much training, but it was still more than Rey got, and he didn't do any of the crazy things that Rey did. The craziest things he did, like blowing up the Death Star through this tiny vent, yeah, that's a plot hole. That's recognized by most people, but Force magic, yeah. Why doesn't Force magic count for Rey? Because she, again, didn't receive proper training before pulling off these things. And I don't know, man. It doesn't help that the character itself is very unlikable, because she is quite arrogant and full of herself and replacing characters and taking over for characters when it's their expertise and not hers. So yeah. Mary Sues. What else can I say about them? There's other traits that Mary Sues typically have, but the most important thing about all of them is that it's not explained in story. So if you write a character, please explain somewhere, somehow, maybe a flashback, a backstory, whatever. Just drop something that explains why a character can do what a character can do. There's also not a reason not to make characters super powerful. Super powerful characters can be very cool. You have to explain why they are so powerful though, and important note, what is the limitation of their powers? Because if you have literal unlimited power, you create a metric F-ton of problems, because now your character is undefeatable, like literally undefeatable. The only reason he'd be defeatable is if he's super stupid. Like if you have, this by the way happens in some movies as well, if you have the power to just something out of existence, why don't you do it? Like if you can go back in time, which is by the way the reason I hate time travel stories, to solve problems, why don't you do it? Like anytime an antagonist has these unmatched superpowers and is defeated, he's just being super stupid and thus not threatening anymore, because if you're so stupid that you can't even use your own powers properly, it makes yourself unbelievable. Heroes can have the two. If you know My Hero Academia, there is Stars and Stripes. She has a somewhat limited power. Basically, she can have 2 active statements at any given time, and one of them is already reserved so she doesn't die, basically. So she has basically one thing that she can say, and she has to know the name of someone. So if someone is called George, she can say George can't breathe air anymore, so George suffocates. Okay, good. This is a superpower that is basically, she can do whatever she wants, literally everything, and somehow she loses. How stupid do you have to be to not come up with a sentence that makes life so difficult for your opponent that we can't do anything? You could literally just say George is dead. Problem. How do you lose a fight? George dead. Done. Problem solved. You don't have to be super elaborate. Well, George uses air to fly, so he can't manipulate air. And George dead. Problem solved. George unconscious. Problem solved. You get what I'm saying here, right? Did you also have to make physical contact? I'm not sure, but there's so many ways to use certain powers that are so broken that you please think about the powers before you implement them. The Force kinda has the same problem, because technically speaking the Force has unlimited power. You can do literally everything with the Force in Star Wars. But while the Force is unlimited, users are limited. And users are severely limited. If you look what ancient peoples like the Kwa and the Rakata did with the Force, and what the Jedi and Sith do with the Force, the Sith and the Jedi look like tiny children in comparison. Their Force understanding, their Force powers is nowhere near the ancient people's understanding and powers with the Force. So the users are the limitation here, not the power itself, which I think is super good for storytelling, because it allows individuals to become way more powerful than other individuals and yet explain how they somehow are still losing despite having these powers, because there is limitations. In any role-playing game you have limitations like a mana pool or something like that, to explain why your hero can't solve everything with literal magic, or the magic system is very rigid and stuff like that. There's many ways to limit this in a believable way. But the moment you do that, you also have to give an explanation why certain people sometimes are capable of overcoming a few of those limits, or why they are so powerful despite those limits being in place. And then you better have a really good explanation for that. There's franchises that do this actually pretty well. There's franchises that do that horrendously, and there's franchises that never break their own rules, which is, by the way, what I would prefer. You still can have super powerful people within the rule set that you came up with. You just have to make sure that what they do is explained and not just, oops, I thought it was cool. Now, there is the rule of cool, and to a certain degree problems can be overlooked, but only to a certain degree. As for the Mary Sue as example, people can accept heroes being way more powerful than others. They can believe that the bad guy has access to powers or whatever that others don't, but you have to explain how they ended up there and how that happened and why that is. If it's just, oh, it's there because I like the writing, I like it to be that way. No, come up with an explanation, please. For Rey and her powers, actually I have to defend her in that regard, because many of the powers that people complain about that she shouldn't have are in Legends, and that's the fun part, because the powers that she does have come from the very source that Disney said doesn't count anymore, which they do a lot. They say the EU, the expanded universe, the Legends stuff doesn't count, that's not canon anymore, and then they draw from this exact source that they themselves banned. It's just such a load of horse crap. Anyway, thank you for watching, have a nice day, and may the force be with you.